Oh my gosh, guys, I'm so rusty. I literally was just going to make this a TikTok video, which probably would have been a lot easier. But for those of you that have never seen me in this capacity, this is my former life as a podcaster. But guys, I feel like, it feels like it's been a tough year for a lot of us, but it's definitely been a very difficult, say, 12-month period for me. And I feel like I'm finally ready to kind of open up a bit more about it. So, those of you who have watched my podcast may have known about my journey with both Graves' disease, which I was diagnosed with in about 2017, 2018, which is an autoimmune condition where the body attacks the thyroid and makes it produce too much thyroxine. I first noticed that just by losing a lot of weight and feeling very tired. But long story short, in 2022, I had a thyroidectomy because my thyroid was also attacking my eyes. So you may see me always wearing sunglasses and wonder why that is. I have very swollen eyes. They've offered me an operation, but it's not something that I'm prepared to do at this time. But yeah, so my my journey with fibroids, which began when just after the pandemic, I went to the GPs trying to get IVF to become a mother. That story is also on my channel, so I'm not going to regurgitate that. But the last 12 months, so say maybe 14 months then. So last year, June, I had a surgery. I had surgery for a very troublesome fibroid. I've been suffering with fibroids and the excessive bleeding and the anemia that comes with it for quite some time. But they offered me surgery in June last year, in which they removed the troublesome fibroid, or so I thought, and I thought that would be the end of my journey. But a couple of months later, the bleeding continued, and I realised that there was something quite seriously wrong. It just turned out that I was bleeding all the time, excessively, going to A&E, bleeding through my clothes, receiving blood transfusions, staying in. But around about November last year, it got really terrible. I had a really, really severe bleed out. Ironically, while I was cooking my Sunday dinner, and me being me, I had this like loads of bleeding, and I just thought I'm going to continue to make my dinner because I'm also a carer. So it's not always easy for me to just pop off to A&E and not think about the loved one that I care for. So I had to finish cooking, and I somehow managed to take myself to the hospital without collapsing, and had a really horrific experience in A&E. But anyway, I was very quickly admitted on this occasion because my hemoglobin levels were so low that it was life-threatening. So being admitted to the ward once again, because I'd gone through this over the previous 18 months and just continuously just feeling just completely drained with it, no one else really understanding what I was going through, many times being alone in A&E. But yeah, they admitted me and they gave me the drugs to control the bleeding, and it seemed to have worked. And I think I was hours away from being discharged when the same thing happened again. I bled out in the hospital, and they were deeply concerned and said to me, right, we're going to do an emergency hysterectomy, and this was scheduled for the next day. So, I was quite scared because I always knew that a hysterectomy was a final option as a course of having these fibroids. But, it was the last resort type of situation. I wanted to remain with my womb. So I had the emergency surgery the following day, and this is where my fear of hospitals and surgery now has come from. I woke up, I didn't know it was 6 hours later at the time, but I woke up and they weren't able to do the surgery. But I'd been in the surgery for about 6 hours. It should not take that long. It should take 1 to 2 hours maximum. Hysterectomy, quite straightforward procedure. But there were complications with where my fibroid was. It had actually prolapsed outside of my womb, so they couldn't get it. So I spent 6 hours in surgery, gave my mum and my best friend the fright of their life, and genuinely nearly died, nearly bled out in that surgery. And woke up, bruises on my arms, all of the needles, all of the cannulas, and literally that was the first time I really cried. And I cried, and I cried, and I cried, and I cried because I thought, this is just awful. This is just like so difficult to explain to anyone how low you feel at this point. But I broke down. But after that experience, they realized that the hysterectomy was the way to go. But in order to have a hysterectomy, I had to have 6 months of Zoladex injections. So that surgery didn't work, and they discharged me. But the consultant said, we're going to give you Zoladex. That will definitely 100% stop the bleeding, because I was bleeding continuously by this point. So it wasn't just during periods, which I shouldn't have had, because according to these doctors previously, I was postmenopausal, but it was bleeding every day. So I took these injections. I had to go to the GP and get them once a month, and they were awful, sometimes painful. But the GPs need better training on how to administer injections, because one GP made me bleed, and that was not what you're supposed to do. But having those injections and taking Zoladex, which is a breast cancer medication to reduce tumours, but obviously a fibroid is a type of tumour, so they said your tumour is too big, we need to give you these injections. And all of these things have side effects, but I don't particularly like injections. I'm fine with needles, but stomach is quite painful, so I had that. And then in March we had hysterectomy, by which point I was terrified, because I'd had these bad experiences, and I was convinced that these people were trying to kill me. So it's just getting my head around the fact that so I had from November to March to understand that I'm going to have this procedure, and all of my friends asking me, how do you feel about it, and me being autistic and quite abstract anyway, and being like, I don't know how I feel about it until it happens. So I had my surgery in March, and during the surgery that they found that there was an extra 3 centimeter mass. So this fibroid that had actually fallen out of the womb and was pushing on my bladder and all sorts was actually still 12 centimeters big. But thankfully I had a very skilled surgeon who was able to do the procedure in one, because he had warned me that it might have to be 2 operations. So I now have, I've had a hysterectomy. I've removed the cervix, but I still have my ovaries, so I'm guessing that's given me some type of hormonal stimulation. But it's like a 12-week recovery. And I will say, after day one, the morphine, it wore off, and all the rest of that, and I was up. I'm built differently, so physically I was okay. It was really awful having to take the blood thinning injections every day. I found that really, really awful, having to self-administer those injections, because my stomach was still quite hard and painful. So that was awful. So any woman that's gone through that, I'm with you, my sisters, because it's awful. But having that, and then reflecting on what I'd gone through in the last 2 years, because until you get to the end of something, sometimes you don't have the time to look back, because you're still dealing with, if you understand what I mean. So just still dealing with it. So finally sitting there, and my family and friends coming to visit me for the first couple of weeks, helping me out. And then, as I expected, within 3 weeks I'm up and I'm cooking for my loved one again. I'm a carer, and everyone kind of forgetting that that's kind of what's happened. But sometimes your own strength can go against you. So it's like my friends were checking in on me, how are you feeling? And it was mainly on a physical level. But I think for any woman that's had a hysterectomy, it's a mental journey as well as a physical journey. And for the backdrop of this, last year, 2024, in April, I was diagnosed with ADHD. I think it was like the October, I was diagnosed as autistic as well, which I always knew anyway, so that was no surprise. But, so many things come with having a late diagnosis. So I was having to deal with that mentally, and still continuing, still working with clients. And, that's why after the hysterectomy, I just kind of put a halt to working with clients, because I'm aware that even though I wasn't feeling the effects, that I'm still waiting for those effects to come. And I feel like in the last couple of months, I've been kind of feeling it in my body. They also think I have another autoimmune illness, which would explain the reason why I'm so tired all the time. So there's a lot going on, but it's like I just want to let people know that sometimes you see people and you think that they're strong, but sometimes they're going through a lot of things. So even my family and friends watching this will be surprised that, this is kind of how I feel. But I've had to my body has kind of made me stop. It's kicking my ass at the moment. It's really, really doing me over. So, TikTok in a way is my therapy, just posting and uploading stuff, because physically I'm not able to do as much as I would like to, and that can be quite frustrating. But I just want to also reflect on how many young women I saw on those wards, and how little attention they pay to women's health in the NHS. I worry that so many women will lose their wombs. I mean, I'm 45 now. I had a birthday last month. I'm 45 now. So I'm guessing there's not much use for my womb in that sense. But to think that women half my age are going through this, and that's why I've made videos and I tell young women, if you're not sure if you want to have a family, freeze your eggs. But I guess this is a rallying cry to just look out for your strong friends as well. Because I am that strong friend for a lot of people, and there are a few people that understand that sometimes I don't show things a bit more, and they have kind of taken me in a bit more. But check on those strong people, because March, it was only a few months ago. My 12-week recovery only ended in June, so it's like I'm not back to normal. There are mental effects from being a woman that's lost your womb. It wasn't something that I really ever wanted to go down that route. I feel very failed by the NHS. I feel like I wasn't listened to throughout the process, but I just don't have the energy and fight to fight them anymore. Like, I feel lucky that I got away with my life, because it could have been, my mum would be planning my funeral in November and I wouldn't have been here. So, I don't take that for granted either. But I'm also aware that my body is always fighting me. So I can't always go as hard as I want to, but I'm always going to try. So when you see me putting videos out and you see me doing silly stuff, just know that, there's serious stuff behind it. I'm going to try and get back to work in the next couple of weeks, because the backdrop of that, I've also had serious issues with my neighbours, and it's affected my mental health and my uncle's mental health, and it's continuous and being failed by the system. You're doing things the right way, trying to get it dealt with in the right way, and it just being no help out there. So I understand when people say things like that. You see, things like that alone. So when I talk about mental health, I don't always mean mental illness. A simple situation of having troublesome neighbours can affect your mental health. Relationship breakups, because I also had the backdrop of that. Around about the same time I nearly lost my life, I walked away from a situation that I felt was not serving me, because I felt it was very one-sided. I do wonder if everything I was going through, maybe it was just like the right person at the wrong time also, because I definitely didn't have the same kind of resilience and patience I usually would have in a relationship. So, just reflecting on that, because at the time I didn't even have time to think about that. When your life is on the line, everything else kind of gets put to the side. I felt failed by some people that I thought were my friends. They didn't understand the fact that I'd withdrawn, and they'd taken it as a personal rejection against them. And, I had a couple of people block me because I'm not responding to them in the way that they would like. And I just feel like they weren't my friends anyway. So, I have the right people around me and the right support, but many people don't. So I'm trying to build a community where online we can support each other. I'm always happy for people to come into my DMs and tell me how they're feeling, if there's anything I can help them with, any advice I can give them about finding a therapist. But I'm also a working therapist. So if you're someone that's seen me on TikTok and doesn't think I'm too crazy and wants to book sessions, I'm always available. I am very selective in the work that I do, mainly because of my circumstances. So, and it has to be something that resonates with me. I don't just do everything, but you can reach out at any time. But I felt it was important because sometimes I project a very happy and, in front, but there's a lot going on behind the surface and behind the eyes. So I've actually taken the sunglasses off so you can see the bags. Like, I'm starting to feel the illness in me. I feel like my body's fighting all the time, and I'm always fighting back. But sometimes I just have to stop. So, listen to your body. Definitely listen to your body, because I feel like a lot of the trauma and a lot of the things that I've been through in my life is the reasons why my body's fighting me. But I'm always going to try and fight back. So I think that's pretty much it. So if there's any questions, please hear it in the comments. I'm always happy to answer questions. I'm going to leave the comments open, because often when I put really vulnerable things out about me, I kind of lock the comments off, because you do have them trolls, and I do wonder how many people seriously take in the information that I'm trying to put out. Because I know mental health isn't popular, but as I keep on saying, it's everyday things. I'm not talking always about mental illness. There is that too. That is a part of it. But poor mental health for a long period of time can stray you into the mental illness. So you can become depressed just from being physically unwell for a long period. So, stop, feeling negative about it and feeling shame. There is no shame. Mental health is health. If you had cancer or diabetes, you wouldn't feel shamed. So it's just health. All right. So let's try and start building positive communities. I try to be a part of as many as I can, but like I say, with my caring responsibilities and sometimes my health, it's not always possible to do what I want to do. But where possible, I'll always support things that are positive. So, guys, have a good day. And I just thought I'd jump back on the mic because a few people have been trying to get me to come back with this podcast, but doing a podcast and is a lot of work that goes into it. So, if there is support for it and people feel like it will help them, I'm always happy to put back on the mic. But it's been a while. It's been about 9 months since I last put these headphones and took this mic out. So hopefully it still works and you guys will have resonated with some of the things that I'll say today. But sending love to you all, and I hope the rest of your week is good.